Hello and welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark, CEO of Leadershipity, CEO of AIM, Athletic Influencer Marketing, and the NIL Academy. And thrilled to be here today. Most people know me as a longtime coach in professional baseball, coaching in 3 World Series. But I get out and I get to speak to great people all over the world, to audiences. And man, today, special guest, my good buddy, Christopher Turner. Christopher, how you doing, man?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, believe it. CEO of Emergicon. Tell them real quick what Emergicon does.
We support fire and EMS who transport patients by ambulance to understand their eligibility for reimbursement, help them get those claims processed, and get them reimbursed.
That's awesome. Now, is that just domestically? Because I hear horror stories about people having to be transported when they're off in Mexico and fall. And does that have to happen?
It does. So it is just domestically, but as you can imagine, because we border other countries, you do have people from other countries in the States who need to be transported by ambulance. So that's a complicating factor, but of course, we're focused in the United States.
For sure. Okay, before we get going, Christopher, tell people where they can find you as they listen to you, want to reach out, learn more from you. Tell a little bit where they can get you.
Of course, I'm on LinkedIn, Christopher Turner, CEO at Emergicon, email cturner@emergicon.com. Those are probably the best two ways to get to me.
Big TikTok account?
No TikTok. No,
No TikTok. All right. That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, you continue to grow at Emergicon and man, really creating this unique brand. We talk about niches in business, man, and you are serving this well needed niche in the market. And man, you've drilled down on this thing to really create a ton of value for first responders and all things that go into running a first responder business, which as we probably most people don't know, that is a super challenging environment to run a business operation.
it is. So, to give you a little bit of background, healthcare is made up of essentially providers seeing patients in all forms, pre-scheduled, not pre-scheduled, all those things. And then there's the whole business of trying to get paid. And that's where things get clunky. And as you can imagine, anybody who's had anything, surgery, baby, this get confusing, bills, in network, out of network, et cetera. It gets infinitely more complicated when you're talking about first response, accidents outside the hospital. So what first responders do is unbelievable. I mean, some of the things that they deal with. I mean, probably a big example is 9/11. Firefighters running into the building, but there's everyday examples, car wrecks and accidents and all these things. It's difficult for them to even deal with the world of getting reimbursed because that's just not their focus. They are one ear listening for tones that they have to respond, and then taking care of people and all these terrible situations, and many times with tremendous outcomes and life saving. But the difficult part is they are in and outside of the whole reimbursement process that we call healthcare. So you can imagine it's a workplace accident. Was it a workers' comp claim? Is it a commercial insurance claim? Is this a veteran of the armed service? Was it connected to duty? All these things that get complicated. And we really specialize in helping to kind of unfurl that to help them understand where they can and can't get reimbursed and really try to just tighten that down and take that burden away from them, because there's just no way that they can get into that and also focus where they need to focus.
Yeah, it's such a good example of a childbirth, right? Which is a
Right.
huge event for a family, but we have 9 months to prepare, right? Like, it's like, hey, man, we're gonna do these meetings and we're gonna do our appointments as we go and get ready. And there are, and I don't want to say there's not emergencies in childbirth. There are, but
Yep.
we do typically have at least some very high monitoring of what's going on. We know there's that risk, and so you're somewhat prepared even for emergency.
Right.
So in the situation where, someone falls out of a tree, no one's planning that this afternoon, and I'm always staggered by the statistic of like 80% of the death rate of a ladder over 5 feet or something. It's
Mhm.
amazing, right?
Right.
And how silly guys are as we are, like, hey, let's get on the roof, Christopher, and fix this. You're like, should we be climbing a
Yeah.
17-foot roof, like
Yeah.
ladder? So I had one of those scary experiences this summer, and yeah, it's an interesting deal. Now let's talk a little bit about your Texas kid, born in Munich, service guy. Your parents were in
Right.
the service, and so yeah, and so you're do the Episcopalian high school. What's an Episcopalian high school like?
It's you've got chapel every day. It's a private school, so they've got greater flexibility over the curriculum. Wear a uniform, which I had moved from public school to that. I think there's a lot of benefit to that, and I know a lot of more schools have gone to that. But Christian based, it gives you a pretty even dose of education, and then in chapel and in some time. So as a kid, you're kind of like, I got to go to chapel, and what a pain. And I'm not going to sing any of the hymns. Get a little older, and you can look back and say, man, probably learned some things and probably got some benefits there that maybe you lean into a little bit more later in life, as I've done.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. It's foundation, right? Like we build foundation even when we don't know we're building foundation, right?
Right.
Because it
That's very
doesn't feel
true.
like, this doesn't matter to me. This isn't that important. And it certainly doesn't feel important to a 10,
Yeah,
12, 17-year-old kid, right?
not at
But
all.
what we're realizing, like, man, I'm going to have to raise 10, 12, and 17-year-old kids at some time. And what am I going to give them? Right.
Right.
And so looking back, I think thankful for that foundation now. But Austin, Dallas area now, but Austin College, when did you grad outside of Austin there at Texas State? Finished up, UT Dallas for your undergrad. Um, so let's talk a little bit about, man. You're this young guy. You're thinking medical school based on the college of Austin College of Medicine, right?
Right.
And at some point, I mean, as a kid, do you even know this exists? Like, hey, I could run this company, this organization to help in medical billing and the procedures and process of first responders. I mean, this is not something any 15-year-old kid even knows about.
No, no, you're right, and I really didn't connect the business side of healthcare until I was probably in the first couple years of college, and I was familiar through my mom with the CEO, actually a physician CEO who ran Parkland Hospital, a big county hospital here in Dallas. So I had some familiarity that there's a business side of it, but I didn't really know what that meant. So I started doing some research, dug in a little bit, and saw that I could stay connected to patients through that. So not as a caregiver, which in retrospect, you talked about foundation. So thankful I'm not a physician for a lot of reasons.
Right.
Nothing
Yeah.
against them, it's against me,
Yeah.
really. I don't think I'd be good at it. But I wanted to have that connection. I didn't have any interest in, working in some place that created, laptops or something that just didn't do anything for me. And as I got deeper into it, and I saw the hospital side and the emergency medicine side, I even saw the insurance side, and I guess it was the emergent nature of helping people in a time that is not anything anybody wished for that just spoke to me. So
Mm.
more so than kind of the typical stay in a hospital or things like that. Not anything wrong with any of those, but just for me personally, the emergency side of it and the pre-hospital and actually in the ER side, I had some experience there. That just spoke to me for whatever reason, humanity, I'm sure.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you've had some unique experiences talking about, being near that ICU and brain surgeries, right? And supporting and watching people that are, sleeping like bears on, hospital, couches and chairs, right?
Yeah.
Floors, wherever they can, because this is an event that's just changed life and everything stops for a moment. And, now you've had this education. you've had this glimpse into this world, and you're gonna adapt in this world. But before we get into that, you're coming up on 25 years of marriage. Congratulations, brother. That's
Thank you.
awesome, man.
Appreciate it.
And then two sons, 20 and 19 years old. Now these are these young men that you were there, going through UT Dallas, figuring it out, Texas State, starting to see some holy crap. Like when these things go down, it's it's tough, man. I mean, these families are hurting and it's
Yeah.
challenging, and you're directing that you want to be a part of this. And so when we talk about your high school experiences, college experiences, what are you hoping for your boys now that they get out of this, and glean from both your experience and from your education, what you're hoping for them?
You know, my wife, who is been a tremendous support and is a far smarter and better person, I think, than I am, always said from when our boys were little, she wanted them to be good people. So she always rejected the idea, I want my kids to be happy. You do, but her MO was always, I want them to be good people. And that is not, I don't think naturally I would have said that. And what we've got now are 22 and 19-year-old who are both, moral, upstanding. They'll I think, say it straight. I mean, they're not kids that have ever snuck or lied or things like that. That to me has been really amazing, and they've taken two very different paths. My older son is pursuing classics, and he'd like to teach, maybe at high school, maybe at college level, and then our younger son didn't see any interest in going on after high school, and he's gone to trade school because he really, really wants to work in a very functional way with his hands. And that to me has been rewarding, and where I've tried to support them is not so much in the schedules and classes and all that. It's more about my learning as an entrepreneur and learning to, you don't. I'm a member of Strategic Coach in their coaching program, and you look at your progress backwards. You don't look at the mountain that you're still climbing. You look backwards, and you say, this is how far I've come. And you don't look at things as, everything's terrible. They're not. One of my connections that I've shared with them working with first responders is, whatever our bad day is, it doesn't even touch the bad day of people that they have to see, and some of the
Mm.
things that are going on there. Not even close. That to me is something that I think is important for everybody to learn, and that's something I shared with them. So my older son always says, "You always try to fix everything." I said, "No, I don't try to fix things. I just try to give you a little wisdom and feedback. Not to deny what you're feeling or anything like that, but perspective is really important, and it's really important for us to, not always assume negative, not always kind of, oh, this is awful, it's raining out, it's hard to get to school, whatever. It's perspective. It's perspective about how you want to respond to what's going on, in your gauge of how, maybe even how reasonable you are. So I think that's what I've passed on. That's what I've really tried to pass on. And I've had some opportunities, particularly through my younger son and a couple of his friends who didn't have dads around, to kind of help them, I think, in that way, and just kind of open up. Do you want to be an entrepreneur? Do you want to kind of make your own path? There's pluses and minuses. Um, we have this unique ability in the United States to do that more so than other countries, I think. I mean, you can found a company for, a couple $100 and off to the races. Now, it may not be successful, but you can.
Yeah, I think that's so great. I think one of the things I love about you, Christopher, as I hear you talk about, you're very intentional about where you're going. Observant is probably, a superpower of yours. Talking about that perspective, but having a postgraduate, Ivy leaguer, and another kid who's like, hey, I am in the trades and I'm focused on creating value. And the boys are equally having impact, like it's just
Right.
wherever they land. I think I think this is what, maybe one of your superpowers is you're meeting people right where they're at. Right. Like this is the scenario. And I really get the fact that this is a tragic event that just happened. And, we're going to meet you right where you're at and help you move through it to the most efficient way we can. And it's challenging in this. And so, No, I think we're losing that. I think that's some of that perspective that we are losing. There was a time where we were kind of moving in the direction to get better at that, and and hopefully we are being having a little bit more grace for others, because I feel like there's always been this, hey, people should be like me, and drive, drive, drive. Like, I don't know if that's good. Like, I know how I am, and my superpower is also a major weakness. Just ask my wife, right? And so it's a pretty dynamic look that you've brought to. And where do you think you developed that perspective?
You know, as you get older, you get a little wiser, you become a little less selfish. And I think it's been there, but it's been coming out more the last several years, certainly. So, a couple of examples. I read or heard recently somewhere, we judge others by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intent. So, perfect example is driving. Somebody cuts you off and you yell, whatever. You might cut somebody else off. And generally, you think, I didn't mean to do that. So sorry, whatever, maybe put the hand up. But we judge the other person as if they intentionally did it. That's an interesting way to look at things and helpful. I think it's been something that's helped me evolve over time. Probably through a few courses, but specific to what we do, one of the things that I found, you mentioned in healthcare and family in the ICU. When I started on the first response EMS side, I was the CFO for a big not for profit that did air and ground ambulance. And I did ride outs with him early on, just as a third rider to kind of see what they dealt with. That to me is probably one of the single most eye opening experiences of my life. So, one of the ones that sticks out of my mind was on a ground ambulance staffed by two paramedics, I think, maybe it's a paramedic and an EMT. But, guys, they're kind of cutting up and doing whatever. And then they get a response and we go. And they respond to kind of little old style farmhouse, slightly rural community, older couple, maybe 80s or so. And the father had cut himself in his greenhouse. Superficial, but bleeding kind of like stuck pig. And even I could tell, not life threatening, just scary looking. But his older adult kids have kind of rushed it there, and everybody's there is concerned, whatever. And the two guys on the truck, as soon as we get there, it's all business. It's caring and business, tending to him, tending the family, calming them down, reassuring them, taking him to the hospital for stitches. And that to me was amazing. Amazing because they respond to things that are, active heart attacks, gunshot wounds, stuff that really, really is life threatening. This wasn't life threatening. It was just scary for the family. And they didn't do the, he's fine. Why'd you even call us? Whatever. This is ridiculous. Take him to the hospital, give him stitches. You don't need an ambulance. Didn't do any of that. Not even close. They treated it as if it was the most severe thing, but it was totally managed by them and he was going to be okay. And you could see the family's relief with that. That to me has been one of many stories that stuck out. And it's helpful because as we train people who come on at our company or anything like that, you can relay some of those stories. So anytime you kind of want to get a little bit either A, big headed, or B, kind of like, my coffee's cold and this is the worst day I've ever had, kind of maybe bring that back into
Yeah.
perspective, of what really, could be going on that you would really not like to have going on.
Yeah, that's so valuable. As I look at that, and I equate that to sports, right? I equate
Yeah,
that to sports of the jokesters in the locker room. But man, it's 7 o'clock when it's game time. There's a whole nother level of focus that all of a
right.
sudden becomes that. And it's one of the things I've seen with kids, that the class clown. And I'm like, I get it. We need to really understand, that the class count may be taking away from other people's learning and things like that. But this may be a way to kind of deal with this role. Like, I've got a
Mhm.
hard thing at home, and I just need a little comic relief in my life. I need a little, decompression, and I do that with my friends, and it's not intentional to ruin your class. It's not. And I think, like you're saying, which I really hope that you heard that here, because I say it a lot, right? Like, hey, is that their intent to ruin your
Right.
class? Like, that actions may be showing up that, but if you'll dig a little deeper, you're like, man, I've got an alcoholic father. I come to school. It's the best place I can be for 8 hours of my day, because
Right.
the other six I'm awake are really tough for me, man.
Yep.
And I'm 14, like, and there's just things going on that people just like, wait, what? Like, if you walk a mile in those shoes, right? It's so different, and it's hard, man. And I want to talk quickly about those folks up front, because it's a big deal. But I do also want to mention, before we jump into that, as a 52, almost 52-year-old guy now, Christopher, what most people don't know about you is you're still gaming. You're a gamer, man. Like, and it was funny, 'cause I just had this conversation with somebody, as an entrepreneur, man. I mean, it's just hours, hours, hours. And we all choose things to how we, recreate, whatever that's going to be, whether it's, we go boating, or we got cars, or we got, like, golf. I mean, a thousand things, right? But, I could tell you, like, from the perspective of gaming, but that's a kid's thing. We're men now, Christopher. We've grown up. I mean, I gotta think there's some people judging you on that. Is that fair?
Probably so. Probably so. That's okay. I can handle it.
Why do you stay in it? Is it your solace? Is it your chance to decompress? Why?
Yeah, it's my chance to kind of decompress. It's my chance, and it's funny. My wife, who's not a gamer, but if we over the years, almost 25 years, of course, um, as I see her play something, even if it's a little mobile game versus what I do, she is totally different. I play to win. I play to win. If I can't win, I don't play. I don't. So that to me is funny. And I realize that that's probably a part of that. It kind of, there's no real stakes. You're just kind of pulling off and kind of letting off some steam. Um, and yeah, that's my thing. I don't, that's it. I don't go to the golf course and just, whack away and all that. And I did this the other day, kind of a long day, lots of conversations, all good stuff. But I was like, now I just need kind of the mindless, just kind of nothing activity, no meaning to it whatsoever, just a little bit of fun.
Yeah, I think, though, I will say one thing about it, that I think all of us have a competitive gene.
Yeah.
We everyone desires to be good at something. And you know what? God gives us talents, man. I mean, like, everyone really is really gifted at something. I have found that in every person I've ever met. And there's that edge. And I don't care if it's whether you're going for first chair on the violin, to
Yep.
have the high score on Galago, which is every place I ever walk into that has that thing. Like, and then, like, I am competitive about things in my life. Now, as a jock, you can imagine I'm pretty competitive about a lot of things.
Yep.
Probably, again, strength and weakness, right, Christopher? Probably.
Yep.
But my assumption is this serves you also in your business, that, hey, I do like to be successful when I'm gaming. I come to win. And my assumption is you come to win at work, because if you don't win, there's a lot of people who lose if you don't take that approach, because people don't get paid, businesses drop, people could lose their homes. I mean, there's a lot of factors in this,
Yep.
because it's a very significant expense all of a sudden that, of course, is never planned for. So all of a sudden, all these things are going on. So my assumption is your ability to win becomes absolutely crucial in the success of many lives, not just you and your employees, but those have tentacles of massive impact. Is that fair?
That's interesting. I'd never thought about it that way, but I think that's 100% fair. And what I mean by that is one of the things, when I get my surge of energy in what strategic coach calls unique ability, it's in a few focused areas. One's competitive, but the specifics of that as it comes to, our day to day and our teams and what we do is we don't want to be abusive to patients that have received some kind of emergency care. And being abusive to them in our world means you haven't done what you can do to try to unpeel the onion of this very complicated process, take as much burden off of them, and make whatever financial piece they may be obligated to, as easy as it can be. It's funny, we've trademarked that, the Texan touch, but it's just, kind of laid back and understanding and making sure that we're not, the worst part of their day, considering they've experienced something maybe been traumatic. But it's also in terms of who we serve, in terms of first responders, that we really want to make sure that we are taking away things that would be considered lies to them based on our own, poor process or ignorance or things like that. And I get kind of worked up when we talk about people that we compete with. We all have competitors. We have competitors as well. And we know that they don't focus on the meaningful parts of what we do. They're focused on things that aren't all that relevant and are what I consider to be abusive to first response and the people they serve. And that's what I always call it, because they have a poor process that relies on a lot of poor actions with poor results. And then they kind of throw their hands up and say, we did the best we can do. And that just irritates me. And it irritates me when we make mistakes. It's not the highest stakes game, but it's pretty high in terms of people who have to dial 911, and what they have to go through. So it's really important that you focus on those things. And it's funny. That's kind of what gets my energy up when it comes to that competition side of, that's ridiculous. Somebody's having to deal with it. That's ridiculous. Let us help you. Come over here and let us help and take some of that away from you as much as we can.
Well, I think it's really, first of all, it's powerful, Christopher, what you're doing. And I mean, I love the impact you guys are having. And Texas is a partner in this as a state, which I really love. Right. That coming alongside you, you're coming alongside them. There are certain states that do not have this quality of care because of this laissez-faire attitude, or they create like hurdles in the way of getting things done efficiently. And we've heard it. We've heard it where, hey man, I'm in this state and I call for a 911 call. It takes 22 minutes. Like, how are we gonna really function in a good environment? And I think what people have really become aware of, Christopher, is this gap between the high quality healthcare billing system and is it really about the care or is it about the money? And man, if we start learning about this, it's like, oh yeah, we care, pay us. and it really feels dark. It doesn't feel like it felt 15 years, 20 years ago. And I don't know that it wasn't that way. I mean, I'm sure things have changed. 9/11, the crisis of the shooting in Vegas, at the concert, there's these epic events that are going on that probably change things. And I'm sure factors that play into the game, clearly political factors. But, do you think it's always been about the money, or do you think we were better intended prior?
That's a good question. Our healthcare system is largely a capitalist system, I would say. And so there's always some profit motive, even though we have, Medicare is generally about, 50% of the payments, and then Medicaid for those people on the lower end of the spectrum. But there's a profit motive, which there's a good thing. The profit motive, I think that we get to technologies and advancements faster in the United States, the profit motive. But then there's the bad side, and the bad side tends to be on the access to health care end of things, which usually doesn't get addressed through legislation. It usually doesn't get addressed through reimbursement. It really leaves people out. So people who just get left out of that. That hasn't gotten better. It hadn't. I don't know that it's gotten worse. There's probably some pros and cons, but it definitely has not gotten better. All the
Mm,
legislation that's gone through, it hasn't gotten better. Um, so that's an interesting thought. And, healthcare in general, and I heard this a while back, and I think it's still true, is the second largest employer in the United States, I believe, after the federal government in total. I may be wrong. That could be incorrect. But it's a massive,
big
massive
number.
industry.
Yeah.
A lot of dollars in it, a lot of private equity, a lot of roll ups and things trying to improve efficiencies was a great deal. But you have the whole side of, again, the access to care, no avenue for reimbursement. They fall outside of the arena. And then you're stressed with almost every industry, as far as I know, the number of providers needed to serve this population. So in fire and EMS particularly, they suffer due to the traumatic events they see. There's a high suicide rate. There's all these things, and they're stretched super, super thin. And then if you want to, my understanding, you want to go to paramedic school or something like that, it's on your own dime. And lots of things are on our own dime. College generally is on our own dime, all those things. But we have for a long time leaned on kids coming out of high school, college. So for our younger son, when I had our conversations with his counselor leaving, she said college, and I said, he's not really interested in college. He's looking at trade school. And she said, college. And I'm like, wait, let's talk about the other options. They had no other options. There was no discussion of other options. And we're missing the boat on some of that. Going to college, medical school, and all that, that's a long, long process.
Long
Nursing
haul.
is a very long process, very expensive. But there's this whole other world of providers that need to be there. And it gets hairy when it gets down to fire and EMS, because when they're understaffed, you talk about the 22-minute response times, that's literal. I mean, they get down to level
Yeah.
zero, is what it's called, where there are no available ambulances to respond or fire or anything like that. Maybe a paramedic staff fire truck. So level zero means if you're dialing 911, maybe it's somebody from a surrounding community coming in. I mean, those things get pretty scary. Um,
Alarming.
and
Alarming.
again, that's how some people get access to healthcare, which is through that process, because they know they can get a response because they need something.
Well, it's a two things kind of come to my mind on this, which is one, I think that the capitalistic drive and part of that winning and competitiveness does keep moving things along. The entrepreneur continues to find a way to win, and they drive success, which does serve us in a lot of ways. I'm massively concerned on the system being broke.
Yeah.
And as I look at like another environment of a socialist medicine in Canada, where now the response or even service has gone from 9 months to 13 to 14 months, is what I've read. And I don't know if that's true or not, so don't quote me on that. But a significant lower response because people in healthcare are leaving, and they're having a labor challenge. And we're talking about things that are significant to quality of life, and you're 14, 15 months out. Like, so the access of care is becoming a global initiative that's getting worse, I think. And so that's an alarming issue. And then, as you kind of talk about this challenge of this frontline worker, these are not highly paid people, yet their response and decisions are life changing. I mean, this is often between life and death. And like you said, going into game mode that they are on and on task right there when it comes. There's no messing around. This is a life or death scenario. In any case, they're ready for that. They're prepared for that. And it's hard for me to gather in my mind, like someone who makes $16 million for hitting a baseball 450 feet, and the guy who just came to save my mother makes $12.50 an hour. And I'm like
Yeah.
thinking, yeah, I can tell you who's more important to me right now. And it's a shift in my brain that's challenging. Where's your position on that?
I appreciate you bringing some of these things out because there's some of the hidden subtext that I don't think people generally get. So I appreciate you highlighting them. Healthcare is woefully underfunded. First responders, EMS, even more so. I mean, the amount of cost to keep an ambulance on the street doesn't even come close to what they can get reimbursed for that. So I remember I went to a very small city council meeting in deep West Texas a few years ago. And it's not something I do as much anymore, but I think they had requested me to come. So I went out there. It always kind of reconnects me to who we serve. So it's not a bad thing. But so small city council, they provide fire and EMS response in their local community. And one of the council members asked me, as we're kind of explaining, this is the reimbursement picture you've got. This is what you're eligible to bring in. And, kind of everything goes right. This is everything we can tap into, et cetera. And the council member asked me, and he looks at me and he says, how do other communities do this? It cost us, I can't remember, $3 million a year to keep a couple of active units on the street just to respond. And I said, they have to rely on taxpayers. They've got to dig into other areas. That's hard. This is a small community, not a massive tax base, but they have this obligation not only to try to provide these services, but also to try to fund them as well. So sometimes they look for an alternate, maybe a private for-profit company to come in there, run their area. That's always a trade-off. There's pluses and minuses there. But the point is what they could get reimbursed in terms of provision of care here isn't great. And in Texas, in my experience, is one of the better states, and for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of coordination of that type of service and trauma response, and now across the entire state, there's lots of discussion coordination about reimbursement and continuing to improve that on a state level. And Texas does pretty well with that, but it still doesn't get close. And you talked about the staffing aspect, and you're 100% right. Paramedic, EMT, nurses on helicopters, they do things in the field that are only done also in the emergency room, usually by a physician. So you can imagine, a chest tube or, active CPR, things like that. But they are not reimbursed, not at the level of physician, but they're not really reimbursed even in terms of what they have to do out there in the field. And it's just one of those things that lags behind. And at some point, we probably need to address it and fix it. We talk about teachers a lot in this country. Don't disagree with that at all. I sometimes think about, what a firefighter might get paid in the shift work they do versus maybe what a teacher gets paid. There's a lot of differences there. And fire and EMS is not dissimilar. So, I think you have a lot of insight in your comments.
That's good. Christopher, tell me a little bit for folks out there. You deal with a gap in your business daily. You see it every day. You have a perspective that's unique that most of us don't get to see. Tell me a little bit about how anything that grounds you in your daily perspective that you can kind of right your ship. Do you have something you go back to stay focused? You're a husband, you're a dad, you're a business owner, you're moving at the speed of light and creating a bunch of impact in the environment for folks. And easy to get off kilter, easy to easy to take a wrong turn, right? So is there something that kind of gets you back to leveling up and being where you want to be?
In short, I think it's gratitude. It's the exercise of going through, gratitude and writing or whatever. So for 4 or 5 years now, I kept a journal, and I spent a little time writing and thinking. And if you go through the exercise of gratitude, that can adjust your mindset really quickly. So at our office, our physical office, we have a gratitude wall, which is a wall we can write on with marker pens in the break room. And we use it sometimes for other things, but it's intended for a gratitude wall. We give off the day after Thanksgiving and have since inception to all our employees to spend a little extra time with their family. And every year I send out a little message about, take that extra day, hug those close to you and all that. For me, in short, there's probably other things as well. But if you if you build in the process of recognizing what you're grateful for on a fairly consistent basis, whether that's in writing or in prayer or whatever that is, that helps clarify a lot of things, because you can pretty quickly pair against what you recently considered to be kind of a negative thing versus, well, let me hold on here a second. There's not only in my world, but across the world, a whole lot of stuff that's working for what I'm dealing with. And I think that just shifts your brain a little bit. I probably have a few other things that I do as well, but I'd focus, I think, if I were to give advice, that's where I'd start with anybody.
That's great. All right. Thank you, Christopher Turner, so much for joining us today. Just loved having you on the show. For everybody out there, see Turner at Emergicon.com. You can find Christopher Turner, CEO of Emergicon, on LinkedIn. Check him out there. And for everybody else, thank you for joining us on the Winners Find a Way show every Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. Christopher, wishing you all the best of the weekend and happy 25th, my man.
Thank you too.